Hello and welcome to the very best of British steam today. Although British Railways retired the last of its steam fleet in 1968, interest in steam engines has continued to grow. These days, Britain's many heritage steam lines provide an unrivaled opportunity for families to savour the nostalgic atmosphere of a steam railway. The preserved railways of Britain have, over the last 40 years, become one of our biggest heritage attractions, rivalling our country villages and our stately homes. The senior line is the Bluebell Railway, set in the heart of Sussex, one of southern England's most beautiful counties. Surprisingly, in such a rural area, the line was originally built with freight traffic in mind. Passenger stations were deliberately built between centres of population, the idea being to serve two towns with one station. A novel idea at the time, but one which was to be a factor in the line's undoing in later years. The majority of the Bluebell's locos and stock are of former Southern Railway origin, or from its constituent companies, as the line tries to recreate a distinctive Southern flavour. The S15s were versatile and popular Southern region mixed traffic engines, built in the 1930s. Horsted Quains, one-time junction for Haywards Heath, was for many years the Bluebell's northern terminus. Thanks to immense effort and determination, the first stage of the long-term objective to reopen to East Grinstead has now been achieved. "847 arrives from Sheffield Park with a Kingscote train. The double platform face on No. 3 road is an unusual feature which often confuses unwary travellers. The quite extensive track layout reflects Horsted Quains' former status as a junction station. The Bluebell has an impressive collection of historic passenger coaches, a small portion of which are marshalled behind the S15. The Bluebell has had to overcome not inconsiderable opposition to its extension plans, culminating in a public inquiry. Fortunately, things have worked out all right in the end, though the battle to return all the way to East Grinstead is far from over. A vintage train runs north of Horsted Quains with 592, a Southeastern and Chatham C-Class 060 built in 1902, and a rake of Pullman cars from the 1920s. The Bluebell Railway is justly proud of its magnificently restored Pullmans, which offer a superb wine and dine service. West Hoathly Tunnel on the Kingscote extension is the longest on a British private railway, at 731 yards. Kingscote Station has been restored almost entirely by volunteers from a semi-derelict neglected shell to pristine BR 1950s condition. The transformation is truly remarkable, but there's still much work to be done. Connection with East Grinstead can be made by vintage bus, as there's no car parking at Kingscote. Next stop for this S15 haul train is hopefully East Grinstead, but not just yet. Where the Bluebell has led the way, other standard gauge preserved lines have followed, all over Britain. Several of these are substantial enterprises, and the longest at present is the West Somerset Railway, whose trains ply the 20-mile branch to the seaside resort of Minehead. Minehead has a spacious station, designed for the long through trains that once brought in holidaymakers by the thousand from London and the Midlands. There was even a slip coach from the Cornish Riviera Express, attached to the branch service at Taunton. British Rail closed the line in 1971, after a long and bitter struggle, but it reopened privately as the West Somerset Railway 5 years later. Former Somerset and Dorset Fowler 280, number 88, was built in 1925 and withdrawn in 1964. It spent the whole of its working life hauling trains over the undulating Somerset and Dorset joint line between Bath and Bournemouth, and languished for several years in Barry Scrapyard before the loco was rescued. Here, near to Blue Anchor, the line parallels the seashore and the Bristol Channel. By an odd coincidence, the nearest point of land on the other side, just 15 miles away, is none other than Barry in South Wales. At Blue Anchor, a sign advertises the Railway Museum, opened in 1985 as part of the Great Western 150th anniversary celebrations. The traditional level crossing gates at this station are now very much a rarity. Small Prairie Tank 5541 is yet another ex-Barry machine, withdrawn in 1962, rescued 10 years later, and first restored to steam in 1975. Heading the other way comes BR Standard Mogul 76079, built as recently as 1957 and withdrawn just 10 years later. The loco was rescued from Barry in 1974. Breasting the summit of the 1 in 65 Washford Bank is 4277 again, on a demonstration milk train, 2 6-wheeled tank wagons and a passenger brake. Until the 1970s, services like this ran every afternoon on branches throughout the West, to be marshalled into mainline block trains for London. This may be just a demonstration train, but recently the West Somerset has in fact handled revenue-earning freight, in the form of rock to build up the eroded sea wall at Minehead. Leaving Watchet for Minehead is Great Western 460 7820 Dinmore Manor, rescued from Barry in 1979, 14 years after withdrawal. Pannier Tank 6412. Unlike most of the engines seen today, it was purchased direct from BR after withdrawal, and went first to the Dart Valley Railway in South Devon. A splendid site here, as Dinmore Manor and 76079 double head an 11-coach train westward from Williton. Williton Station is the halfway point on the line and the chief crossing place. From the mainline junction through to Watchet, the West Somerset was laid on Brunel's broad gauge, opened in 1862 and converted to standard gauge 20 years later. The final stretch from Watchet to Minehead had always been standard gauge. Now here is yet another locomotive saved by Barry Scrapyard, 7828 Odney Manor. 8 of this class passed through Barry, so, along with another purchased direct from BR, no fewer than 9 out of a total of 30 built have survived to steam again in the new millennium. Stogumber has the sleepy atmosphere of a rural station deep in Great Western Country. You can almost smell the wooden floorboards and the disinfectant in the waiting shelter. Noticers have the genteel politeness of a bygone age. 4277 completes the scene perfectly. Bishop's Lydyard, 5 miles from Taunton, marks the normal limit of working, though the track is in place through the Taunton Cider Company's sidings at Norton Fitzwarren to a junction with the main line. Occasional specials have worked through from the main BR network. The face on number 88 reminds us that Thomas the Tank Engine and similar weekends, though they might horrify the purists, unfailingly bring in the customers and their cash. Not very surprisingly, in view of the scale and costs of railway preservation today, this theme trend is now firmly established on many preserved lines. The 18-mile-long North Yorkshire Moors Railway from Gromont to Pickering offers steep gradients, magnificent scenery and a cosmopolitan collection of locomotives. A victim of the infamous Dr. Beeching's axe, the reopened section of the former North Eastern Railway route from Whitby to Malton lies wholly within the national park of the same name, give or take a few hundred yards. A group of objectors to the line's closure formed together in 1967 to consider reopening the line in stages to Pickering. The result of their efforts is undoubtedly one of the most scenic standard gauge steam lines in Britain. Rebuilt West Country Pacific Heartland eases cautiously away under newly installed signalling with a typical midweek train bound for Pickering. Once out of the short tunnel to the south of the station, Heartland passes the locomotive depot, where the North Eastern Locomotive Preservation Group's volunteers are preparing Standard Class 4 75014. This is easy work for a mainline loco like 34101, which has plenty of power to spare, despite the gradients. Later in the day, the smaller standard 460 puts up a spirited performance near Beckhole, in rehearsal for another season on the West Highland Line's Fort William Mallaig trains. LNER days, the line carried through trains from London and the West Riding to Whitby, as well as an all-stations local service between Malton and Whitby. In the 1960s, however, the route was condemned as a heavy loss-maker, and complete closure took place in 1965. Thanks to the ITV series Heartbeat, the line and its locos are known to more people today than ever before. The much photographed three-arch bridge at Darnholm frames another resident loco. Goathland is the principal intermediate station between Gromont and Pickering. Its design is identical to dozens of other northeastern railway stations built in the second half of the 19th century. Many original features have been delightfully restored. The approach to Goathland from Gromont includes a lengthy 1 in 49 climb. This section of the line was opened in 1865 to replace an earlier rope-worked incline. The central section between Goathland and Newtondale passes through characteristic moorland scenery, including the infamous Fen Bog, which proved to be something of a challenge to early railway builders. On this stretch, the line reaches its summit, some 550 feet above sea level. Skelton Tower affords an excellent viewpoint for watching trains descend alongside Pickering Beck from Newtondale towards Leversham. To provide access to the forests in this remote part of the valley, the North Yorkshire Moors Railway constructed a new halt at Newtondale in 1981, with waymarked walks leading to spectacular clifftop viewpoints. Newbridge Crossing signal box just north of Pickering also controls the Pickering station area, as well as the level crossing itself. The southern terminus of the line is the pleasant market town of Pickering, the small station being very conveniently located for the town centre, which is well worth exploring after the exhilarating 18-mile steam run from Gromont. The East Lancashire Railway has quickly established a reputation for a variety of motive power. The preserved diesels here are a highlight for some enthusiasts, but steam, as ever, is the biggest draw. The resident standard Mogul 76079 was actually built less than 15 miles away at Horwich Works. It's gala day on the East Lancs, as two distinguished visitors pound up the Rossendale Valley. Standard 75014 and Bullied Light Pacific 34027, Tor Valley. Today's East Lancashire is the middle section of the old Lancashire and Yorkshire Railways line from Manchester through Bury to Bacup. Closure north of Bury had come for passengers by 1972 and freight by 1980. But in partnership with the local councils, the East Lancs Preservation Society was able to buy the line complete, reopening 4 miles from Bury to Ramsbottom in 1987 and the next 4 miles to Rawtenstall 4 years later. 60532 Blue Peter has been privately preserved since withdrawal by British Rail in Scotland back in 1966. Brooks Bottom Viaduct crosses the River Irwell near Summerseat Station. The gradient has been steadily uphill over the 3 miles from Bury, mostly at 1 in 132. Nuttall Tunnel has a battlemented north portal to chime in with a nearby Gothic mansion, now demolished. 76079 and 75014 are a splendid sight, double heading. Ramsbottom Station, at 4 miles from Bury, is at present the halfway point. Tor Valley departs for Rawtenstall. Ramsbottom Station has been recreated for visitors, with shop, museum and refreshment room, where once throngs of mill workers and office clerks jostled aboard the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway's extremely Spartan suburban carriages. Rawtenstall station today retains its period atmosphere and has a tidy, well cared for look. The East Lancashire Railway has achieved remarkable success in a limited time, and the new extension to Heywood has recently opened, allowing passengers to enjoy a longer ride. One of Britain's pioneering preserved lines was the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway, which operates between Keighley and Oxenhope. Here is a train arriving at Damhams, 2 miles up the line. The little station here had been closed by British Railways in 1949. About the time Damhams closed, the passing loops further up the branch were lifted, leaving it single track throughout. But when it reopened, the line became much busier, and in 1971 this new loop was laid at Damhams by the Preservation Society. With the starting signal pulled off, the train gets underway again. The gradient here is 1 in 64, and the engine fighting it is BR Standard Light Mogul 78022, rescued from Barry in 1975. Damp Pennine weather means the driver must watch for slipping. Keighley and Worth Valley Railway succeeds in capturing the total atmosphere of a thriving steam age branch line, with its beautifully kept stations and its vintage selection of locomotives and rolling stock. The 4 3/4 mile long route between Keighley and Oxenhope was opened by the Midland Railway in 1867. Because of its mainly rural nature, traffic volumes were never great, and business declined sharply after the Second World War. Not surprisingly, the line was an early casualty of 1960s cutbacks, closing to passengers in 1961 and to goods traffic in 1962. Almost immediately, the preservation movement, which was still very much in its infancy, stepped in. Regular traffic on this delightful rural byway was to resume in June 1968. Mytham's Tunnel wasn't bored until 1892, when the line had already been open 25 years. Increased business in that time, much of it due to growing Bronte tourism, prompted the Midland Railway to realign the track for half a mile, easing the grade and avoiding a trestle viaduct across the river and the Vale Mill Dam. This flimsy structure, on a sharp curve, had a speed restriction on it, and local people were scared of crossing it by train. The final mile, at 1 in 68, leads to Oxenhope, where the hills crowd in around the terminus. Though quite short, the Worth Valley line and its varied stock are brimful of interest, and among preserved railways, it's recognised as one of the oldest and most professional in the business. It's back to Great Western Country now, as a train pulls away from Llangollen in the Dee Valley behind 7822 Foxcote Manor. Large Prairie Tank 4141 stands on a freight as another departure is headed by Black 5 44806. This engine, withdrawn by British Rail in 1968, returned to steam by a rather unusual route, having been preserved for many years by the Greater Manchester Museum of Science and Industry. This striking bridge crosses the River Dee half a mile west of Llangollen. When the line reopened in 1984, it had been disused for 20 years and needed costly repairs, for which the local council gave a great deal of help. Unlike others we've seen so far, the Llangollen Railway used to be part of a through route that could once have qualified as a main line, from Cheshire to the Cambrian coast. But the rural areas it passed through produced little intermediate traffic, and it fell victim to the Beeching Axe, closing in December 1964, a month earlier than planned due to flood damage. The station house at Berwan is a well-known landmark, here being passed by 4141 with the freight. The Llangollen Railway Society began work at Llangollen Station in 1975, nearly 11 years after closure, with the track long lifted and trackbed well overgrown. Restoration and relaying is a massive task. The first train ran in 1981. Since then, the line has gradually extended to Carroog, 8 miles west. The Llangollen Railway has built up a sizable locomotive stud during its first 2 decades of existence. Foxcote Manor was restored to full working order in 1988. It's one of 8 former Great Western engines owned by the Society. As well as extending its tracks westwards, the Llangollen Railway has gradually increased its range of services, introducing Berwyn wine and dine trains, Saturday shoppers specials and occasional diesel days. There's even the possibility of hiring a funeral train? A train approaches Glundafrydwy on a stretch of line reopened in 1992. The hills, the sheep and the drizzle are typical of the Welsh border country. The ultimate goal of the railway is Corwen, another 2 miles on, which will give a splendid 10-mile run through the Dee Valley from Llangollen. The line has already become a big factor in the area's tourist economy. Another private line that certainly knows how to successfully market itself is the Great Central Railway, linking Loughborough with Leicester. Running over part of the former Marylebone to Sheffield main line, the Great Central, with the backing of the Mainline Steam Trust, aspires to recreate the atmosphere of mainline steam, running large engines over double-track line. Although running through a pleasant enough rural landscape, the Great Central doesn't have the dramatic scenic virtues of, say, the North Yorkshire Moors Railway, and must rely on some very professional marketing to attract customers. The Great Central regards enthusiasts as important customers and quotes up to 60% of its passengers as falling into this category. While it would be unfair to say that other lines didn't attempt to please steam fans, this aspect is perhaps more important to the Great Central, given its less dramatic scenic aspects. Accurately recreating the days when Western Region 460s worked holiday expresses south from Nottingham Victoria to the south and west, with a slack haul accelerates a southbound train over the newly installed double-track section. With a slack haul is no stranger to the line, as shortly after being built it actually worked over Great Central metals during the famous 1948 locomotive exchanges. Another of the line's major projects has been the provision of additional siding accommodation at Swithland to provide storage space for both passenger and freight stock, including the splendid Steam Railway-sponsored Windcutter rake of 16-ton mineral wagons. Rothley Station has been faithfully restored, complete with authentic signal box and many carefully chosen items of station furniture. The overall effect is to recreate this typical Great Central Island station much as it would have looked when it was first opened in 1899. The use of visiting locos, like this Standard Class 4 from the East Somerset Railway, which is on extended loan, is a surefire way to generate extra interest. Rothley was the limit of operations until the extension to Leicester North was opened in 1991. Although the Great Central is already famous for its double-track section, the second line has still to be relayed over the vast majority of the route, and some parts still retain the feel of an attractive secondary main line. BR Black Liveried 6990, with its appropriate train of assorted BR liveried coaches, completes the scene. The Swindon-built Standard 4, restored to its BR appearance, heads another assorted rake of coaches, including an ex-London and North Eastern catering vehicle. Once a regular mainline performer, the National Railway Museum-owned loco, Solamiel, is now in the custody of the 5305 Preservation Group, which moved its operational base from Humberside to Loughborough. mainline steam operations facing an increasingly uncertain future, the long-term aims of the Great Central, with its double-track running, are certainly becoming more and more attractive. Bridgnorth is home to the thriving Severn Valley Railway. The site of the former goods yard now provides accommodation for over 40 preserved steam and diesel locomotives, many but not all of Great Western origin. The Severn Valley Railway is one of Britain's longest established preserved lines. After closure by British Railways in the mid-1960s, this first section from Bridgnorth to Hampton Load was reopened as long ago as 1970. The last 3 decades have seen the line progressively extended, and it now stretches a full 16.5 miles from Bridgnorth to Kidderminster, eventually linking up with Railtrack Metals. Highley is one of 5 intermediate stations on the line. The Severn Valley Railway enjoys an enviable reputation for its high-quality restoration of stations and other railway buildings, and Highley is no exception. This section of the line, from Hampton Load to Bewdley, was reopened in 1974. A steam-hauled service operates daily from mid-May to early October, and at weekends during other holiday periods. There's plenty of motive power to choose from. On this occasion, it's the turn of another popular class, the British Railways Standard 264 tank. At Highley, as at other stations on the line, a huge amount of restoration work was necessary because the line had been sadly neglected in later British Railways days. Pride of place must go to Arley, a well-deserved past winner of the Association of Railway Preservation Society's annual Best Restored Station Award. The location has been used on many occasions by film companies wanting an authentic period scene, including the recent BBC comedy series Oh Dr. Beeching. The graceful Victoria Bridge carries the preserved railway over the River Severn, just to the south of Arley. Fortunately, there are few other major engineering works on the route, enabling the costs of restoration and maintenance to be kept relatively modest. Bewdley Station was for some years a boundary between Severn Valley and BR Working. It remains a major Severn Valley depot, while the town is a tourist centre in its own right. Bradley Manor waits in the bay as another local resident, Standard Tank 80079, runs in. .0079 departs eastbound for Kidderminster. This section of line was built by the Great Western Railway as a later link to their original Severn Valley route. It became the last section still carrying BR trains. Operation by the preserved line began in 1985. apart from the colour film quality we now take for granted, there's no way of telling that this scene was filmed in 1999 and not 1959. The standard tank this time is 80098 from the Midland Railway Centre in Derbyshire. A local approaches Foley Park. Two Great Western bogies behind Hawksworth outside cylinder pannier tank 1501. Basically a shunting design, this 1949 engine was withdrawn by BR in 1961, but worked for the National Coal Board at Kearsley near Coventry until coming to the Severn Valley in 1970. The scene at Kidderminster, with rail tracks lines on the left, shows at once why the Severn Valley challenges for first place in any league table of real railway atmosphere in preservation. The final extension to the new terminus at Kidderminster was opened in 1987. Here it was necessary to provide entirely new facilities, but in full keeping with the original Great Western style. The new terminus was constructed on the former goods yard. As well as providing the Severn Valley Railway with much needed space for car parking and other facilities, it enables an easy connection to be made with the rail track Birmingham to Worcester line, running just to the right of the water tower. Portmaddock Harbour Station is the starting point of one of the best known and best loved preserved lines in the country, the Festiniog Railway. The first train of the day is a diesel, worked by this rather curious 060 diesel hydraulic locomotive built in 1983 and named Harlech Castle. The use of a diesel on lightly loaded services such as this is a useful economy measure for the largely volunteer-run Festiniog Railway. Most other trains are steam-hauled, using the Festiniog Railway's fleet of 12 engines. Double-heading is rare. This example was only because Prince was being moved to Blaenau Festiniog for the opening of the Queen's Hotel. The Festiniog Railway is 13.5 miles long and has 8 intermediate stations and halts. The station here at Tannerbulk was well known in the 1930s and 50s because the station mistress, dressed in full Welsh national costume, used to hand out free cups of tea to passing travellers. The leading locomotive, Prince, was built in 1863 and is believed to be the oldest steam locomotive in the world still in use on its original line. Today, like all Festiniog Railway engines, it's oil-fired. By contrast, the second locomotive, David Lloyd George, is the newest engine operating on the line, built in 1992. The decision to convert the Festiniog fleet to oil burning was made in the 1970s because sparks from the coal burners were all too frequently setting the adjoining woodland on fire. Like so many Welsh narrow gauge lines, the Festiniog Railway was built primarily as a freight carrier, conveying roofing slates from the quarries of Blaenau Festiniog down to the harbours at Porthmadog. However, its tourist potential began to be realised as early as 1863, when the first passenger carrying trains were run. The decline of the Festiniog Railway began in the 1930s, with the withdrawal of all year-round passenger services. A residual freight service lingered on for a few more years, but in 1946 the line was closed completely, its functions taken over by other standard gauge railways and by road transport. Revival began in the 1950s, when a wealthy benefactor was found to take over the moribund and debt-laden railway company. Reopening between Porthmadog and Dwallt took place in stages between 1955 and 1968. Beyond Dwallt, the original course of the railway had been submerged by a new reservoir, and it wasn't until 1982 that this final section to Blaenau Festiniog was reopened. Today's combined standard gauge and narrow gauge station at Blaenau Festiniog was opened in 1982. Now it was possible to travel from Porthmadog to Llandudno with just one change of train here at Blaenau. The Festiniog Railway was effectively integrated into the British Rail network. The new station at Blaenau brought a significant increase in traffic both to the Festiniog Railway and to the British Rail Conwy Valley line. An estimated 10% of travellers on the Festiniog are now using the service as a through means of transport rather than merely for leisure purposes. From the smallest line to the most sophisticated, steam railways have so much to offer. However, without the dedicated efforts of so many hard-working volunteers, these magnificent machines would have been condemned to static display or even scrapped long ago. Bye for now.